Hello, welcome to Pasinic Mum, a podcast by three Vietnamese college students trying to navigate adulthood through the scope of both their Vietnamese and American cultures. We're just here to chat and share our lives with you. How are you guys doing today?
Not too bad.
With everything.
This week with everything? Well, what do you mean by everything? Like,
Everything. Life,
everything,
the world, school,
life, the world.
jobs, people.
I mean, I guess in light of today's topic, I'm a little bit distressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really tired and disappointed of how everything's going in general, really.
Yeah, frustrated. Well, this week we're going to talk about something that means a lot to us. It's a bit more serious than most of our episodes, so get ready. But since the COVID-19 outbreak in 2019 that later came to the US in 2020, there has been a spike in hate crimes against Asians. It's not unique to America, it's not unique to any specific ethnicity, and it's not unique to any age or gender or religion or sexuality within the Asian community. There are a lot of things responsible for this increase of bigotry, ranging from misleading rhetoric about the cause of the virus that continues to be used today, or discrimination against Asians that has existed for centuries. We have seen mothers being taken away from their children. We have seen our elders beaten and bruised. We have seen our community rise against a wave of hate that has no right to exist. As Asian Americans coming to age today, we felt that it was important to talk about our experiences and share our thoughts with you. So, here we are. Here we go. First off, we're going to talk about what it was like growing up Asian in America. First, just expectations and stereotypes that we faced. So, Zoe, how about you start us off today?
Yeah, so, well, for me, growing up, I had, a language barrier. So, as, being raised by immigrant parents, I started off learning Vietnamese. I just spoke Vietnamese as a young child. Because I still remember going over to my grandparents' house, always talking in Vietnamese, and then, even before going to school, starting preschool, they would speak to me in Vietnamese, and then, when I started preschool, there was a lot of English that I was very confused about. I think I even remember on the first day of preschool, that was when I learned my English name. When they took me to open house, they showed me what preschool is. They were like, "Oh, this is your English name. It's Kevin." And I'm like, "Kevin? I've never heard this."
Kevin?
Yeah, I was like, "I've never heard this name in my life, and now you're telling me this is my name." All I know, my name is Zui. I'm Zui. Who's this Kevin? Right. So I guess that was when I first learned my English name, and that's where I started referring to myself as Kevin and everything like that, But yeah, growing up, there was a lot of difficulty learning English, kind of relating to English terms and English in general, because I remember it's kind of like that street smart versus book smart kind of thing. I guess a lot of street smart tech related to English stuff, I didn't really catch that, or I didn't pick it up very easily because of that language barrier. And so yeah, but I was lucky enough to be raised in more of a diverse area, so it wasn't necessarily purely one race, right? But it wasn't I felt left out, but if I was to be selfish, I would say I would want to see more Viet people around me, but because I went to Uni and all that stuff, that was where I kind of got my experience with Vietnamese people. But growing up, school wise, it was mostly just different ethnicities. It was very diverse. Yeah.
How about you, Cindy?
Well, for context to start off, in general, I don't really remember a lot from elementary or middle school, just because there were a lot of experiences I had were just so bad that I guess my mind kind of blocked them away. So I'm really bad at recalling memories from those times, and it's just overall, I guess, like my brain's coping mechanism in minimizing situations, which I will kind of go into later. But yeah, that kind of sucks. But what I can remember is that when I was young, I didn't really completely understand race, but I knew that there was some aspect in every person that distinguished from everyone else, right? So, to be honest, not a lot of people looked like me in elementary school. I was small, skinny, pale, black hair. I think everyone would joke around that I was a vampire, but instead of getting offended, I thought it was kind of cool. But, so I kind of like that, I'm not gonna lie. But I guess, like, if you read into it, it's just a little bit weird. I don't know how to describe it, really. It's just a weird feeling to have. And so I knew I was Asian as I got older. I knew I was Asian. I was Vietnamese. So when people asked me what ethnicity I was, or like, what am I would tell them I was Vietnamese. They asked, oh, what's that? And I was like, well, it's kind of like, a branch of Asian, like a type of Asian. I didn't really have the words to say it because I was in elementary school, and so they would just say, oh, so you're Chinese. And that really sucked to hear. But I would always just say, yeah, something like that. It's basically the same thing. And it sucks that I had to, minimize my identity, essentially, to being something like that, something along those lines, just because just felt like our community wasn't really being supported in those times, and no one... I feel like in elementary school, my elementary school, they really praised, like, being safe, kind, and productive, and just being respectful, which is the golden rule for everyone. But they kind of pushed the idea as to not see race, like, oh, I don't see color sort of situation, instead of recognizing or trying to translate to kids that, like, this is our current society. There is racism in our society, but here's how we should fix that. Teaching that to kids, how we can, like, kind of at least acknowledge it and then know how we can do better with those kids. I
had quite a bit of a different experience than you guys. You guys grew up in a more diverse area. I did not. I grew up in white suburbia. But yeah, I have quite a bit of different experience than you guys do. You guys grew up in a pretty diverse area, at least much more Asian. Like, there's a bigger Asian community where you guys grew up.
I mean, I live in Federal Way. It's Korean hub, pretty much.
I do not. I grew up in a pretty white town, white suburbia. I am very grateful for what, like, the resources I had growing up here. I went to a good school district. I was able to take AP classes, get college credit in high school while still going to the high school. I am very grateful for the privileges I have in that regard, but, like, throughout elementary school into middle school and junior high and high school, I was, like, one of the very few Asians in my class. I only knew 2 other Vietnamese kids in my graduating class. There were probably, like, a few more, but those were the only 2 I knew. There were other Asian kids. Like, I have a Filipino friend, Indian friend, Chinese friend. Like, there were other Asians, and as I got older, we had more exchange students go to high school and stuff. But it was definitely difficult to find a belonging. College essay topic. Because it really felt like I was too Asian for where I grew up. But also, I felt too white for Vietnamese culture, which is something I don't talk about very much. And it was very weird because I get teased on both ends for being too white or for being too Asian. And both suck. It's not fun being kind of, I don't know, put in a box like that I'm too Asian or I'm too white. I'm just me. I'm a Vietnamese girl with experiences in Vietnamese culture and also American culture, and neither are bad. And so growing up being teased about that is definitely rough. That's still something I have to deal with today. Now I go to a much more diverse college campus. Granted, we can't really see each other in person, but it is nice seeing other Vietnamese students in my classes and having people to relate to with my experiences. And obviously, like, it's never going to be perfect anywhere I go, but it's better-ish, and it's just something I still have to work on and, like, deal with and face. But yeah, in regard to, like, language barrier, I was the opposite than Zui. I know more English than Vietnamese. I mainly could just, like, understand it, not speak it.
Hence you're an English major.
I mean,
No,
yeah,
I'm
I like writing. I'm an English major because I like writing. But, yeah, like, I can't communicate very well with my older family members, especially with my grandparents, and that is weird because I hear, like, my friends have relationships with their grandparents, and I don't really. Like, I love my grandparents. I'm sure they love me, maybe. But it's just, like, it's something very weird to grow up with that I hear about my grandparents from my parents, and not from them. But yeah, I was very grateful for the connections I had with my family because we hung out with my family a lot. I still got to be surrounded by Vietnamese culture and traditions. I went to Vietnamese church. We all went to Vietnamese youth group. But yeah, it's just very weird having to be in those two groups growing up because I never felt like I fit in either. And I learned that you don't really need to fit in either. Sometimes you can just be. So, yeah. And something that I've been learning in college is, well, I already knew about this, the concept of model minority. For those of you who don't know, the concept of a model minority is the idea, this really originated with Japanese and Chinese communities, I believe mainly Japanese, if I remember correctly from my class in fall quarter, but it originated with those communities who came into America and tended to succeed, and much more than anyone expected from them. And it's the idea that they are the model minority, and it has become more generalized to Asians, the broader Asian community, and it's the idea that they are the model minority. We are placed on a pedestal, that we are naturally inclined to succeed, and it's a myth. It's the model minority myth that we are naturally inclined to succeed and that we are placed higher than any other minority community, which is wrong. It's wrong for us, and it's wrong for other minority communities. But yeah, what's your guys' take on that? Because I can go on forever, but I'm sure the listeners would love to hear from you guys.
Did you want to touch on it, Cindy, or?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that I could go into. But again, I will try to condense it down. Let's think about my own experiences. Well, my own experiences, I guess in like elementary or middle school, again, kind of like similar to a Zui situation, we did have a lot of diversity, but if I were to be a little more selfish, I wish there were more Vietnamese people. But anyways, In middle school, I was in a specific cohort, so I only saw that cohort in most of my classes, if not all, like for 3 years in middle school. So I was, with the same people, right? And there weren't a lot of Asians in general with my elementary and middle school. So that's the context. So generally speaking, I guess as an Asian female, I was expected to kind of be, I don't know, a model student almost, or they would just, I would be put on unrealistic expectations based on academics.
Told to be quiet, respectful.
Yeah.
Don't speak out.
That as well. I feel like this kind of ties in to my personality in general, because I feel like my personality, as being a quiet, introverted girl in school, fit the stereotype. So then I guess when other people saw me, I just fed into what they already know as the stereotype. And I mean, my personality is just my personality. That's just who I am. But
we love your personality.
But I guess, like, because it fed into that strict stereotype, they weren't expecting, like, any much more from me in terms of, like, if I spoke out or, like, called someone out and such. I wasn't really taken seriously, really, or I was even ignored, which really sucks. But it's like weird because, I was just talking about how people have these expectations for me, but then when I speak out based on those expectations, they don't really like it. So it's just, I don't know how to explain it more than it puts me in this uncomfortable position where at one point I was like, okay, so what am I supposed to be? I thought that I could just be me, right? I shouldn't be defined by this stereotype, but I feel like I was. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Took me a while to break out of my shell too, and to, not always be that teacher's pet or that high achieving person. Don't have to take the most AP classes. Don't have to get the highest score on the test.
Yeah.
How about you, Zuri?
I think I had a somewhat of the same situation-ish, but, like, in regards to, like, the whole stereotype of, like, Asians being really smart or, like, good at math or blah, 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 Because, like, I think for me, I played into that, or not played it, but I fit that stereotype of being smart in math, because I was good at math when I was in, like, middle school, high school. And so people would come to me to get help in those certain subjects that I was good at. But when they finished getting that quote-unquote help, they would be like, oh, he has all the answers because he's Asian. Like, he's Asian, so he has all these answers. So I'm like, it's not because I'm Asian. It's just that I know about this stuff. I've done my research, I've worked hard to, like, understand what's going on. So, but just hearing that it was like, oh, it's because you're Asian, you know all this stuff. It's like, wait, that's another reason. Come on now, right? And so that whole playing into the whole stereotype thing, I think I had that affect me in a way. And so, and it goes in hand with that whole model minority thing, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but I was told, hey, you can get into college easier because you're Asian. They like Asians in college. Or you'll have
I've been told that too.
Because they have higher expectations. And it's true, there is a case. I believe it's with Stanford versus students for fair admissions. Yes, Stanford v. Students for Fair Admissions.
Right, it was a case back
Yes.
then, right? I forget
Yeah,
what
it was
year?
a case a few years
It was
ago.
like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a case a few years ago where it was found that Asian students were...
Was it
that
neglected or
Asian
favored?
Favored. When
They were
Asian
favored, right?
students were... the Asian students that were accepted tended to have much higher, like, credentials, I guess. Like, a better application compared to, like, white students who were...
Quote unquote, if
admitted.
you were Asian, it'd be easier to get into Stanford, right?
No, they had to have higher expectations.
Oh, it's opposite.
Yeah, they
kinda
had to
thing.
have
Okay.
higher expectations. Like,
Yeah.
a kid with a 1500, an Asian student with a 1500 SAT would get in the same as a 1200 SAT white student. As an example.
Gotcha.
It's not, that's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
based on the case
The
itself, but it's
expectations of an
example.
Asian was higher to get in.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I heard that shiz all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, it's a lot of pressure for Asian students, and also it's very harmful for other BIPOC communities because they are seen as lesser. They are told that they need to do as good as us, or that they will never achieve as good as the Asian community. And also, it's the idea that, like, you know, Asians are given a seat at the table, but we aren't given a voice. Like, we should be grateful that we are given a seat at the table when no one else is. Like, no other minority is. Which is, like, very messed up
Yeah.
for many reasons.
I hope you guys don't mind, but I kind of want to go into the whole model minority myth thing. But what is it? This past year, it's 2021, so 2020, past year, yeah. I took a class in my spring quarter called the Post World War II Asian American Experience. And then this past quarter, winter 2021, I took a class was Japanese or Asian or American incarceration internment camps, or internment camps in America, right? And so taking these two classes that kind of went hand in hand, but what I learned was like I said, I didn't know much about the model minority thing until I took these classes, and that's when I really kind of was open to not only Asians as minorities, but just minorities in general in America. And I think I couldn't have taken it at a better time, because when I took it, that was when, like, the whole Black Lives Matter movement started coming up back the middle of 2020. That's when I took it. And so, not to, like, put other minorities down, but because all minorities have this whole, we all have our struggles in America, right? And actually, I remember writing my final essay for that class, and was like, I had to preface it. I was like, I don't want to put down any other, like, minorities or anything like that. The truth of the matter, systemic racism is real. It's been embedded in the country. I'm writing this essay. Vietnamese, Filipino, all these other immigrants coming here to reunite with their families, and these people come into the country with nothing, right? But because the law said that they are high working class, that's all people think. These high working class people are coming in, therefore they're well off. They don't need our help, right? And so I watched this one documentary during that class, and they said that these, like, immigrants who came to reunite with their family were put in some of the most run down apartments you could ever see. No running water, no working electricity, just literally nothing, littered with like the trash. And it's just sad to see that these people were, quote unquote, were supposed to be what is it? The whole act was supposed to be bringing high class people, and then you see all these other people, and to add to that, they didn't even get help from the government or anything like that, you know. So that kind of built on that whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and to go back a little bit, when you're talking about immigrants, it's also like they were treated so poorly, and then there's also compared to like Latinx communities from South America, and they don't get that privilege. They don't get the privilege to reunite with their families, and it's comparing the two communities. Like, yes, these Asian immigrants were able to come into America and reunite with their families, but there's a catch here. They don't get it as equal as everyone else. They don't get the same rights as other citizens. And this other group of immigrants can't even enter.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I believe, Cindy, you wanted to add something, right?
Yeah, so, like, in general, the model minority myth is stupid. Like, when we're comparing, like, the privileges that minorities have, it's just so difficult because you can't condense it and analyze it the way that we wish we could. Because white supremacy has been so complex, it's been building over, like, centuries.
It's embedded into the system when it started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's just too complex to measure or to even try to compare different minorities against each other, which is why we need to all recognize, like, the disadvantages that everyone has. We need to grow as a community, right? Mm-hmm. And just try to tackle all this together, because the enemy isn't each other, and it's just feeding more into this white supremacist society that we have. The enemy is white supremacy itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what
and hence the remodel minority, where we get to redefine what it is to be a minority and to unite with other groups. But yeah, now that we've prefaced our backgrounds as Asian Americans and talked a little bit about the idea of the model minority myth, 'cause it's a myth, I'd like to move on to the current issues of violence against Asians during this time of COVID. What are your guys' thoughts? Cindy, what's your take?
All right, I'm going to start with my first year of college, because that's kind of where everything went down on my timeline. So my first year of college, when I was traveling at the beginning, when I was traveling in the streets of Seattle, because that's where I lived during that time, I was very cautious because I am a woman, and in our society, men are scary, unfortunately. But we're not going to delve too much into that.
Issue for another day.
Yeah. But once the beginning of the pandemic started, it kind of shifted into people becoming wary of me because of my identity as an Asian, or I look Asian. So it's kind of dumb, but at the beginning of the pandemic, people weren't really treating it seriously. They had their masks, like, underneath their noses. Just not protective against COVID at all. Please keep your masks above your noses. But, like, when I was walking in the streets and people had their masks under their noses, all of a sudden they see me and they shift their mask up. Or they distance themselves even further away from me. Yeah. Because at that time, the publicity of the opinion at the beginning of the pandemic, or it's still been very strong, is that Asians caused the coronavirus.
Specifically the Chinese, though. That's what it was like. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't care.
They don't care what kind of Asian. Well, they just minimize.
It builds into that whole thing, yeah.
Which kind of builds into, like, what we were talking about, before. about people reducing all ethnicities of Asians into one type of Asian. But then the world started targeting Asians in attacks shortly after, based on those public opinions, which are completely wrong. Those are just lies. They're not even opinions. And so the arrow of fear pointed back around to me as an Asian, because I was afraid of getting targeted. I was afraid for my parents because they didn't, at times they didn't have the luxury to work at home. They had to work at their respective places. Luckily for me, my grandparents are either in Vietnam or in very safe areas. So I was really, worried about my own parents. But it's frustrating that that I'm having this fear at all,
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be happening, period. And the reason that it's stemmed, or like the reason that it's stemmed to, is stupid. So that's what I think.
I agree. And it's just something like weird to think about, the way that we have to adjust our mindset. Cindy, you and I, especially like as Asian women, not only are we Asian right now, but we're also women. So we were already thinking about this, and a lot has happened recently. A lot of awareness has been centered around the sexualization of women in general and the harassment. And then on top of that, you have the aspect that we're Asian, and there's this whole idea of like the fetishization of Asian women that is awful. And, like mail order brides and stuff like that. And just, it adds a whole other layer of it.
It's disgusting. Yeah. Like,
and
what
it's
I
just
was
sad
talking
to
about
see.
earlier.
Oh,
sorry. I was just gonna add on,
Right.
like, what I was talking about earlier, like, about my personality and how it kind of matches the stereotype. But, I mean, because my personality almost matched the stereotype that people had, because I was, like, quite introverted, it feeds into the idea that Asian women are submissive and able, like, they'll do anything you tell them to, which is disgusting. And that feeds into the fetishization. And I have a little story, actually. So it's kind of funny. I had a coworker text me. Like, hey, where can I meet Asian women, like, to date? Sorry if that's racist. And I just said, yeah, it's pretty racist, because you're feeding into the idea of, like, first of all, yellow fever, gross. And the only reason you have a strong preference with Asian women is because you're assuming that all Asian women are quiet and submissive and will do anything you tell them to. And that is why Asian women can be so appealing, because people have controlling issues, which is terrible. That was embarrassing to hear. Like, that text happened like 1 or 2 weeks ago when all of this,
it was pretty recent,
Asian American hate.
Oh, man.
It was,
and like, to go off of that a little bit, like, I have had friends say that there's nothing wrong with it because they don't understand the issue of fetishizing a certain race or a certain group of people. Their argument is, well, what if it's just a type, right? What if someone likes that type of complexion or hair texture or hair color, or the features associated with that. And I had to explain to them that it's okay to have a type, but there's a difference between having a type for someone based on their race and having a type for someone based on their appearance. I had to explain to them that there's a difference between liking someone for their race and liking someone for their physical attributes or their personality, because the latter can cross racial lines. It can go into any group, versus a race is a race, and that is not something to be changed. And the fact that you are sexualizing it, like Cindy said, based on like submissiveness, how quiet they are, or it's just insane. It's just crazy, and it's messed up on so many levels.
Yeah. And before I go into my kind of take on it, is like I just want to say, like, I feel so sorry for you guys that you guys had to experience that, you know. But it's also like, it's just sad to see that this isn't something that just happened today, right? It's been happening for years, and it's happened in the past countless times, right? When we talk about how, like, what is it, the whole, like, the picture brides and like all that stuff, right? It's like, this has happened. This was an incentive to Japanese people or Japanese men back in like the 1920s, 1915s, 1920s, right? For them to bring or kind of just permanently settle here, right? But that also plays into how you quote unquote you fetishize women, Asian women, right? And so it's just sad to see that history hasn't necessarily changed, and it's kind of like repeating itself, you know. And so, and then what I've also learned was like that the Asian American title it's fairly recent. I don't know if you guys do that, but it just came. We started using that, I want to say, in the 1970s. Yeah, 70, 71, 72, somewhere there. That's when it started to be used. And so, but the problem with the word Asian American is it's mostly referred to just East Asian, right? So when you hear Asian American today, most likely you're going to think, oh, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't, you don't really think about the other Asian countries around there, like the Indian.
Like Western Asia.
Yeah, like the Western, Polynesian, or even, right? Like,
hence the term
even,
AAPI.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Even Filipinos are like, they don't even know what to call themselves because of this whole thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it's sad to see how there's so much conflict in how to refer to people, because I know there's a lot of people who are like, if you say, oh, you're an Asian American, right? No, and then they would get defensive, be like, no, I identify as like Vietnamese American or Korean American, Chinese American, Filipino American, or something like that, right? They want to, what is it? I'm blanking out. Specify. They want to specify of what they want to be, right? And so, and even like it goes into play of how the whole virus today and the whole Asian American hate, you know, it's just really sad to see that it's repeating itself. History's repeating itself.
Yeah. And I just like want to acknowledge that like the anger and the fear and the frustration and the confusion that we're feeling right now is what a lot of other minorities have been feeling for a long time, and at a much more intense level. And like, not to place like lesser value on our experiences, but it's fact that there hasn't been as much outright violence towards Asian Americans until much more recently compared to like the Black community. And we've never experienced this intensity of hate. We've had microaggressions, of course. We've had discrimination, of course. But not this intensity, and have it been so forward. And, like, I understand more now. and like I feel for these communities, and it's crazy to think about what her world has come to, where we have to think about this because it shouldn't be getting worse, it should be getting better for everyone. We're supposed to progress, not regress.
And I feel like in the time that we have right now, our world has so many resources now, right? I feel like back then, or like in very, very old times, it was almost easy to be ignorant because a lot of people just didn't have the resources back then. But now is in a different time, and we really do have a lot to look into, and I feel like it's our responsibility as a human, as part of the species, to, like, you know, communicate with everyone and address these problems that we have in all of these minorities, right? So I guess this is a message to all our listeners, but please use your social media, please use the platforms that you have to read upon and use them and advocate for these communities, because there's a lot of power, you know, in anything that you do.
And to build off that, like what Jasmine said about it hasn't been these many events that kind of like show the struggles of Asian Americans as opposed to, let's say, like the Black Lives Matter and like Latinos and all that stuff, right? I wouldn't say it's not that there hasn't been many, but it hasn't been talked about as much in the media, because I do strongly feel that the media is a very dangerous and very powerful very powerful source, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we don't see it in the media, it doesn't mean it's not happening anywhere else, right? Yeah. It's still happening today. It is, if not on the same level. Like, I think minorities in general have all these struggles, but not every minority is being highlighted in the media. And so I think like Cindy said, it is our job to stay up to date and to educate ourselves as well, to be wary of what's going on in the world, you know, because like I said, it's not that it's not happening, it's just not highlighted. Yeah.
But yeah, as we close this episode, we would like to acknowledge the lives of the women who were unjustly killed at the massage parlor in Atlanta, as well as the violence against our community, especially our elders. And we are going to include their names in our description if you're on Spotify or Sounder, and as well as on the screen now if you're on YouTube. Insert something here. And as students with voices and the credibility of the institutions backing us, our universities, as well as the privilege that we have to access these public platforms, such as the space here, where you're listening to us, as well as our social media, we promise to make use of our resources and to support our community.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening to us talk about the injustices against the Asian community. We understand that this is a lot to take in, and we are here for open conversation on the matter. So let us know your thoughts, either in the comment section down below if you're on YouTube, or on Instagram. And be sure to tune in next Friday for our next podcast.
Yeah, and going off what like Cindy said, don't be afraid to like just hit us up too if you guys want to talk about anything. So
DM us.
And so anyway, just DM us. I'm pretty sure our socials are on our Instagram and everything too. So but our podcast is available on Spotify and YouTube under our name. You can also follow us on Instagram at @PastaNikMam to connect with us and to receive updates on our podcast. So hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye. Hello friends, it's me, Jasmine, here to tell you about our charity of the week. With recent events, we believe that it's extremely important not only to support the Asian American Pacific Islander community, otherwise known as the AAPI community, but especially our local communities. So, this week we are using our space to promote the Friends of Little Saigon organization that is based in Seattle. They were founded in 2011 in response to the gentrification of the International District that led to the displacement of many Asian-owned businesses. In order to support this community, they promote and advocate for the neighborhood of Little Saigon in Seattle, Washington. They hope to continue to uplift this community and the families within by focusing on preserving the cultures, economy, and history of Little Saigon. All of us involved with Pasadakmum love this community, and we hope you will consider supporting them during this time of uncertainty for the AAPI community. Thank you.